The arrival. The Tselvarians, an ancient alien race, had explored countless planets in their search for new resources and worlds to conquer. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity could imagine, and their ships could travel across the stars in the blink of an eye. For years, they had sought out new territories to expand their empire. So when they discovered a small, seemingly harmless planet in a distant galaxy, they felt confident. The planet was named Earth, and all initial scans showed nothing unusual. There were no signs of advanced civilizations or hostile forces. The atmosphere was breathable, the water was clear, and the wildlife was no more dangerous than the animals on the thousands of other worlds they had visited. Earth, it seemed, was perfect for colonization. Commander Zorath, the leader of the expedition, gazed out of the window of their flagship, the Calor's Pride, as the planet grew larger in the distance. He was calm, almost eager for the mission ahead. The fleet was well prepared for any minor threat they might encounter, but Zorath felt no real fear. He had never known defeat. And this world, Earth, was simply another easy conquest. Send the initial survey team down, Zorath ordered, his voice steady and commanding. His second-in-command, Tariq, a seasoned warrior, nodded and made the necessary arrangements. Soon, the scout shuttle detached from the larger fleet and descended toward Earth. Zorath watched as the shuttle's tiny figure shrank, descending through the atmosphere and into the lush forests below. We'll begin by establishing contact with any life forms, if they even exist, Tariq said with a slight chuckle, though the words seemed to carry no humor. Zorath was confident. The reports showed that the dominant species on Earth were primitive. Their technology was far behind, and they had no spacefaring vessels. He expected the humans, if they were even intelligent enough to be called that, to be primitive beings, living in small tribes or scattered villages. It was the perfect time to expand the Tselvarian Empire. The scout shuttle landed on Earth's surface just as the sun began to set. The forest around them was quiet, too quiet. The air was thick with the smell of trees and the wet earth beneath their boots. The shuttle's small engines powered down, and the team of Tselvarian explorers stepped out. They were equipped with advanced scanning devices and weapons that could vaporize any threat in seconds. But there was nothing to worry about, they thought. After all, Earth was just another planet, right? One of the scouts, Lyra, stepped forward and activated her scanning device. It beeped softly, reading normal atmospheric levels, with no signs of any hostile creatures. She smiled, adjusting her helmet. Everything seems fine, Commander. The air is breathable, and the wildlife is within acceptable ranges. Zorath nodded. Proceed with the survey. Keep your communications open. I want constant updates. The team spread out, moving carefully through the dense forest. The trees loomed high above them, and the only sounds were the occasional rustling of leaves and the chirping of insects. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Zorath had expected a world filled with chaos and disorder, as he had seen on many of the planets he had conquered. But this was different. It's almost as if the planet is waiting for us, Tariq muttered, eyeing the towering trees warily. Lyra gave a nervous laugh. Nonsense. This is a peaceful world. Look at the readings. There's no sign of anything dangerous. As the group moved deeper into the forest, their scanners picked up strange energy signatures. These readings were oddly familiar, but also unsettling. Zorath frowned and glanced at his team. What are these? Lyra's scanner blinked and buzzed, confirming that the energy readings were coming from the Earth itself. I'm not sure, Commander. It's like the ground is alive, but the readings are far too weak to pinpoint. Stay alert. We don't know what this is, Zorath ordered, his confidence slipping just a little. The team continued their search, moving further into the thick woods. The air became colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. The faint glow of their helmets lit the path ahead, but the further they went, the more they began to feel as though they were being watched. It wasn't long before they encountered their first surprise. One of the scouts, Vren, suddenly cried out and stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror. His hand reached for his scanner. "There's something out there. I saw." Before he could finish, a massive shadow leaped from the trees, crashing into him with terrifying force. The team rushed forward, but the creature was already gone, leaving nothing but the sound of snapping branches in its wake. Vren's scanner lay on the ground, its screen cracked. His body was nowhere to be found. The other scouts looked around, horrified. No one could explain what had just happened. Zoreth's voice crackled through the comms. "Report. What happened?" Tarik was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the darkness. "It's gone. Whatever it was fast, and it took Vren before anyone could react." Zoreth's heart raced. This wasn't the peaceful world they had expected. It was something else, something dangerous. He turned to his team, his confidence now shattered. "We need to get back to the shuttle. Now." But as they started to retreat, the shadows seemed to close in on them. The air felt heavier, colder, and then, all at once, the night came alive with the sounds of creatures moving through the forest. And this was just the beginning. The Tselvarian scouts moved quickly through the dense forest, their advanced boots making almost no sound against the soft earth. The air was thick with tension. Every shadow seemed alive, and every rustling leaf made their nerves tighten. Commander Zoreth's mind raced. This was supposed to be an easy mission. The humans were supposed to be weak, primitive. So why had they already lost a soldier? Tarik led the group, his weapon drawn, and his eyes scanning the darkness. Lyra kept close behind, gripping her scanner tightly. The strange energy signatures had not disappeared. In fact, they were getting stronger. The readings pulsed on the device's screen, but the pattern made no sense. It was almost as if the planet itself was reacting to their presence. "We need to keep moving," Zoreth ordered. "Double-time it back to the shuttle." But before they could take another step, a deep growl echoed through the trees. It was low and guttural, unlike any sound they had heard before. It wasn't human, but it wasn't completely animal either. Lyra's breathing became uneven. "Commander, that sound, it's not coming from just one place." Zoreth looked around. She was right. The growl wasn't coming from one direction. It was surrounding them. The team tightened their formation. Their weapons hummed to life, glowing faintly in the dim light. The Tselvarians were elite warriors, trained for war. But wars were fought against armies, against ships, against enemies that could be seen, not against unseen things lurking in the dark. Then movement. A shadow shifted between the trees, too fast to track. Another shape blurred past them, just at the edge of their vision. The growling grew louder. "Fire at will," Zoreth barked. The scouts opened fire, their weapons releasing streams of energy. Blue streaks of plasma lit up the darkness, scorching the trees and illuminating the forest for brief moments. But there was nothing to hit. Their shots struck empty air or vanished into the trees. Then the first scream. A soldier at the back of the group was yanked into the shadows, his rifle clattering to the ground. He was gone in an instant. No struggle, no chance to fight back. Just gone. The others turned, their weapons raised, but there was nothing there. The forest was silent again, as if nothing had happened. Zoreth clenched his jaw. "We're dealing with something we don't understand." Tarik took a step forward, his voice low. "Sir, what if this planet isn't what we thought? What if it isn't just another world to conquer?" Zoreth didn't answer. He didn't want to believe it, but something was very wrong with Earth. Then, the whispering started. At first, it was faint, just the wind, maybe. But soon, the voices became clearer. Strange, distorted voices speaking in a language none of them understood. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Lyra's scanner beeped wildly. She looked down at it, her hands shaking. The energy readings were off the charts now, but they were no longer coming from the ground. They were coming from above. Slowly, hesitantly, the group looked up. High above them, in the towering trees, pairs of glowing eyes stared down. Not just one or two, not even a dozen. Hundreds. The whispers turned into laughter. And then, all at once, the creatures attacked. The creatures descended like a swarm. Dark figures, fast and agile, with eyes glowing in the night. Their movements were unnatural, almost fluid, like shadows with a life of their own. Zorath barely had time to react before one of them lunged at him from the treetops, its claws slashing through the air. He instinctively raised his weapon, firing a burst of plasma that lit up the darkness. But the creature darted to the side with eerie speed, dodging the attack effortlessly. Zorath's heart raced. These weren't just animals. They were intelligent, fast, and they knew how to fight. The others didn't fare any better. Tariq swung his weapon, trying to catch one of the creatures as it leaped toward him. But it was already gone, vanishing into the shadows before he could even fire. Lyra wasn't quick enough either. One of the creatures dropped from a branch directly above her, knocking her to the ground with a sickening thud. Her weapon went flying, and the creature loomed over her, its claws dripping with something dark and viscous. Lyra screamed and rolled to the side, just barely avoiding the creature's strike. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing for her weapon. But the creature didn't pursue. Instead, it watched her with those glowing eyes, as if savoring the hunt. Zorath was still fighting, his mind racing for a plan. He knew they couldn't stay here. This wasn't a battlefield they could win. They were being hunted, not by a military force, but by something far more dangerous, something that understood the land and its creatures in a way they never could. "Fall back," Zorath shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Get to the shuttle. Now." The team started retreating, but it was slow, clumsy. The creatures were everywhere. One soldier fell behind, and Zorath didn't need to look to know what happened next. Another scream echoed through the forest. Zorath's pulse quickened. This was not how it was supposed to go. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. "Keep moving," Zorath barked, forcing the remaining scouts to pick up the pace. They pushed through the thick brush, but the creatures were relentless. More of them dropped down from the trees, surrounding the group in all directions. Their glowing eyes followed their every move, and the whispering voices continued, growing louder with each step. They weren't just being hunted, they were being toyed with. Tariq stumbled, barely catching himself before he fell. He glanced over his shoulder and saw one of the creatures right behind him, its claws outstretched. Without thinking, he turned and fired, hitting the creature square in the chest. It screeched and collapsed, its body twitching violently before going still. But it wasn't enough to stop the others. "We're not going to make it," Tariq yelled, his voice frantic. "We have to try." Zorath snapped. "The shuttle is just ahead. We can make it if we keep moving." But as they pushed forward, the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. The earth trembled, and the trees around them creaked as if something immense was stirring from below. The creatures stopped. For a moment, everything went still. The whispering ceased. The glowing eyes faded into the shadows. And then the ground cracked open. From the depths of the earth, something enormous rose. A massive creature, far larger than the ones attacking them, emerged from the ground with terrifying speed. Its eyes were the same glowing gold as the others, but its body was like a mountain, covered in thick, armored scales. It let out a deafening roar that shook the very air. Zorath and the others froze. This wasn't just a predator. This was something far worse. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. The creature's eyes locked onto them, and Zorath realized, too late, that this was no mere attack. This was a warning. Earth had a protector, and that protector had just awakened. The shuttle was far too far now. They weren't going to make it. They were trapped. The monstrous creature towered over them, its glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. It let out a guttural growl, a deep, bone-rattling sound that made every nerve in Zorath's body scream with fear. The other creatures, the smaller ones that had been hunting them, backed away in silence, almost as if they were paying respect to the massive beast that had just emerged. Zorath clenched his weapon, but deep down, he knew it was useless. Plasma bolts had barely slowed the smaller creatures. There was no chance this one would even flinch. His team stood frozen, staring up at the monster that now blocked their only escape route. Lyra was breathing heavily, her hands shaking. What is that?" she whispered. Zorath didn't answer. He didn't know. The creature moved, slow and deliberate, as if deciding whether they were worth the effort to kill. Its nostrils flared, and its massive claws dug into the earth. Then, without warning, it let out a powerful roar, a roar so deafening that the trees shook, and the air itself seemed to vibrate. Tarek fell to his knees, gripping his helmet. "We're dead," he muttered. "We're already dead." "No," Zorath growled, grabbing his arm and pulling him up. "Not yet." He turned his attention back to the beast. It was intelligent. He could see it in its eyes. This wasn't just a wild animal acting on instinct. It was measuring them, watching how they reacted. And then, as if making a decision, the creature took a step forward. "Move," Zorath shouted. The team broke into a desperate sprint. It didn't matter where they went. Anywhere was better than standing in the path of that thing. They charged through the dense underbrush, branches slashing at their armor, boots sinking into the soft earth. Behind them, the creature moved, and it moved fast. A thunderous crash shook the ground as the beast lunged forward. It was massive, but it was no lumbering brute. It was quick, terrifyingly so. Trees snapped like twigs in its path. The ground trembled under its weight. Tarek turned to fire a desperate shot over his shoulder, but Zorath grabbed him before he could. "Don't," he barked. "You'll just make it angrier." "What do we do then?" Lyra shouted. "We can't outrun it forever." Zorath didn't have an answer. The shuttle was still too far, and every second, the creature was gaining on them. He knew, with sickening certainty, that they weren't all going to make it. Then, just ahead, the terrain changed. A cliffside loomed in the darkness, a sheer drop into the unknown. Zorath's mind raced. If they kept running, they'd be trapped. If they stopped, they'd die. Unless... An idea sparked in his mind. It was reckless, insane, but it was the only chance they had. "Get to the edge," he ordered. "Now." The team hesitated for only a second before obeying. They ran, their legs burning with exhaustion. The beast behind them roared again, the sound like a war drum signaling their doom. Zorath reached the cliff first. He peered down and saw nothing but darkness. He had no idea how deep the drop was, or if there was even a way out below. But it didn't matter. He turned to his team. "Jump." Their eyes widened. "Are you insane?" Lyra shouted. "We'll die." "We'll die if we stay here," Zorath shot back. "This is our only chance." Another crash. The creature was right behind them now. There was no time for debate. Zorath took a deep breath. And then he leaped. For a brief moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, the darkness swallowed him whole. Zorath plummeted through the air, the wind rushing past him as his heart pounded in his chest. Below there was nothing but a chasm of inky blackness. He had no idea how far he was falling, or if there was any ground waiting for him at the bottom. The team followed him, one by one, their forms cutting through the night sky. They had no choice. The creature was too close, and they had no chance of outrunning it. But as they fell, Zorath's mind raced. This was a gamble, one he wasn't sure would pay off. A crackling sound suddenly pierced the air. Tarek was shouting, his voice barely audible over the rush of wind. "What if we don't land in water? What if?" His words were cut off by the sound of something hitting the ground hard. Zorath didn't have time to turn and check on him. The others were right behind, and the only thing that mattered now was surviving. Then, with a jolt that nearly wrenched the breath from his lungs, Zorath hit the ground. The landing was rough, and he rolled when he hit the earth, his body slamming against rocks and jagged debris. The air was knocked from his lungs, but he forced himself to his feet, gasping for breath. His eyes adjusted to the low light of whatever cave or ravine they had fallen into. It was deep, very deep, and he could hear the echoes of the others hitting the ground, followed by more heavy impacts. But the sounds didn't stop. There was a sudden rush of movement from above, and Zorath's heart sank. The creature had followed them. "Get up! Get up!" he shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm as she stumbled to her feet. The others were already on their feet, their faces pale with the realization of what they had just done. They had no idea where they were, no idea how deep they had fallen, and no idea if they were going to make it out alive. But the real danger was above them, the thing that had been hunting them, the thing that had followed them down into this hole. They couldn't fight it here, not in this dark, confined space. They had no weapons left, at least, not any that would do any real damage to the creature. But there was one thing they still had: their will to survive. "Move," Zorath barked, his voice hoarse. "Find shelter, find cover." The ground beneath them trembled, and Zorath knew the creature was getting closer. He could hear its claws scraping against the rock, its guttural growls echoing down the ravine. The walls of the ravine were steep, but there were some places that seemed to offer cover, cracks in the stone that might hide them, at least for a while. "Over here," Tarek shouted, pointing to a narrow opening in the rock wall. They scrambled over the rough ground, sliding through the narrow gap one by one. Zorath's breath was ragged, his mind racing. There was no time to waste. He needed to find a way to turn the tables on the creature. Something, anything, to keep them alive. Inside the cave-like opening, they huddled together, trying to catch their breath. The darkness was thick, but there was a faint glow far deeper within. Zorath squinted, his heart still pounding, as he tried to make out what was there. "What is that?" Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Zorath strained his eyes. It looked like a passage, something that led deeper into the earth. But he wasn't sure. And he wasn't sure if it was a way to safety, or if it was more danger. "Stay quiet," Zorath muttered. "We need to move carefully. The creature might still be able to hear us." They waited, listening, but the sounds of the creature's pursuit grew fainter. For a moment, it seemed like they might have lost it, but Zorath knew better. It was never that easy. The creature would find them again. It was relentless. "We have to go deeper," he said after a few moments, his voice steady but low. "We can't stay here." They didn't need convincing. The danger was still very real, and the glow in the distance promised some sort of escape, or at least a better place to hide. One by one, they entered the passage. Zorath led the way, his senses alert for any sign of movement or danger. The walls of the cave seemed to pulse with a strange energy, the air thick and humid. As they moved deeper, the faint glow became brighter. Zorath could almost feel the walls vibrating with a strange power, but he didn't have time to wonder about it. He had to focus on keeping them alive. And then, just as they thought they might be safe, a loud crack echoed through the cave. The creature was close, too close. Zorath's heart skipped a beat as he realized they weren't alone in this cave anymore. Something was stirring in the shadows, and it wasn't just the creature hunting them. Something else was down here too, something older, something far more dangerous. The walls trembled as a deep guttural growl echoed through the cavern. Zorath's breath caught in his throat. The creature was here. It had followed them into the darkness, but something was wrong. Its movements had changed. It wasn't rushing toward them like before. It was cautious. A shiver ran down his spine. The hunter was afraid. Lyra pressed her back against the cold rock, her breathing shallow. It stopped. she whispered. Tarik gripped his side, still sore from the fall. Maybe it lost us. Zorath shook his head. No, it's hesitating. They stood in the narrow passage, half hidden in the shadows. The strange glow deeper inside the cave pulsed like a heartbeat, illuminating ancient symbols carved into the stone. It wasn't natural. It wasn't just a cave. Lyra pointed at the carvings. This place, it's not empty. A sudden low hum vibrated through the ground, making their skin tingle. The glow brightened, revealing a massive, circular doorway embedded in the rock. The symbols around it flickered with an eerie light. Then, without warning, the doorway groaned and slid open. The air rushed inward as if the cave itself was breathing. Beyond the doorway was darkness, thick, unnatural, and endless. Tarik swallowed hard. That is not normal. Zorath didn't need to be told. He could feel it. Something ancient had been sealed away here, something powerful. And now they had disturbed it. A deafening roar erupted behind them. The creature had lost its patience. It charged forward, its claws scraping against the stone. Lyra gasped. It's cunning. Zorath turned back toward the dark passage. They had two choices: face the monster hunting them or step into the unknown. He didn't hesitate. Move. Inside. Now. They rushed through the doorway just as the beast lunged. Zorath barely had time to glance back before the massive stone door slammed shut behind them, sealing the creature outside. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a new sound filled the air, a whispering voice, ancient and cold. It came from the darkness ahead, from something waking up. Zorath clenched his fists. They had escaped one nightmare, only to enter another. The air inside the new chamber was thick with a strange, almost oppressive energy. Zorath's senses screamed at him that something wasn't right. The faint glow in the distance revealed more intricate carvings on the walls, but they were no longer just symbols. They seemed alive, shifting and twisting, as if they had a mind of their own. The glow wasn't just from some natural source. It pulsed with a rhythmic, almost sentient beat, like a heart that had been still for millennia, but was now awakening. Tarik took a hesitant step forward, but his footfall echoed too loudly in the silence. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Zorath answered, his gaze flickering around. He felt the weight of the ancient place pressing in on him. The walls felt alive, as if they were watching them, waiting for something. But what? Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shuddered. Zorath's heart raced as the hum of energy grew louder, vibrating in his bones. The doorway behind them was sealed. There was no turning back. The only option was to go deeper. "Let's keep moving," Zorath said, his voice steady, though inside he felt anything but calm. "Stay close." They ventured further into the chamber, the eerie glow guiding their way. With each step, the hum became more intense, the very air around them vibrating. Zorath could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as they passed through a narrow archway into a vast, circular room. The size of it was beyond anything they'd encountered so far. An entire ancient city laid out in ruin before them. Massive stone pillars stood tall, some cracked, others whole, and the entire room was covered in dust and decay. Yet there was a strange sense of presence, like something alive was waiting for them. In the center of the room, a massive, intricate structure loomed, black as night, made of a material that shimmered with the same unnatural glow as the carvings. Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing against one of the pillars. The moment her skin touched the stone, the room seemed to pulse with energy. The carvings around them came to life, glowing brighter as if they were acknowledging their presence. Then the whispering voice returned, louder this time. "They have come." The sound wasn't just from the walls. It was inside their minds, a cold, commanding voice that felt older than time itself. Zorath gripped his weapon tightly, eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. But nothing came. Instead, the hum of the room began to intensify, and the ground underfoot began to tremble, like the heart of the chamber itself was waking up. Zoreth's eyes shot to the structure in the center. It was moving. Pieces of the black structure shifted, revealing something hidden deep inside. It was large and covered in layers of ancient, intricate plating. Something was awakening. Something powerful. "We need to get out of here," Tariq yelled, fear in his voice. But Zoreth couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the structure, and his instincts screamed at him to stay still. The voice in his head spoke again, this time more forcefully. "You have awakened me. You cannot leave." It was then that Zoreth understood. The very thing that had been sealed in this place was not a weapon, but something far worse, a force of nature that had been bound for eons. They had accidentally triggered its release. "No one leaves," the voice whispered. The ground beneath them cracked, and the room seemed to bend, twisting around them. The structure in the center was alive, pulsing with a power far beyond anything Zoreth had ever encountered. The walls began to close in, the ceiling lowering, and Zoreth felt the pressure building in his chest. They were trapped. The ancient being had awoken, and now it would not let them leave. Lyra backed away, panic setting in. "What do we do, Zoreth? What do we do?" Zoreth's mind raced, the realization sinking in. They had no weapons, no way to fight this ancient power. Their only hope now was to survive the nightmare they had just unleashed. The voice echoed in their minds again, this time with a cruel chuckle. "You will learn what it means to awaken the beast. Welcome to your final test, Deathworlders." Zoreth's heart pounded in his chest. The ancient being's presence was overwhelming, and the air seemed to crackle with its power. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were closing in, the ground was shaking, and the entity that had been sleeping for so long was awake and very, very angry. The nightmare had only just begun.